Hi, I'm Shalini Roy. I'm a senior research fellow at the International Food Policy Research Institute based in Washington, D.C. And I'll be speaking about the potential of social protection systems as a promising strategy to support women's climate resilience, as well as about some priority evidence gaps around how best to design social protection for this objective. I'll start by giving just a bit of background on social protection so we're on the same page about what we're referring to. Social protection broadly refers to programming aimed at helping the poor and vulnerable cope with shocks, build human capital and assets, ensure minimal well-being over the life cycle, and this includes insurance, labor market policies, many other things. Within that, it also covers the category of social assistance, which includes the large national programs that commonly target cash or food transfers to the poor, often alongside other complementary programs like trainings and other things. And this kind of resource transfer program is what we're going to focus most on here. These resource transfer programs reach a large share of poor populations within their countries. Cash transfers alone reached about 11% of the overall population in low and middle income countries as of 2018, and that's been increasing in light of the COVID pandemic. And so social protection systems are a really promising platform to leverage because they already exist and they already reach such a large number of vulnerable people. Evidence also shows that social protection is really effective in improving well-being. At the household level, it reduces poverty, food insecurity, it increases savings, assets, livelihood opportunities. We know that adding well-implemented complementary programs can further improve a broad range of outcomes, particularly for outcomes where people are not only constrained by resources, but also don't have enough information. We've seen that adding complementary training to cash or food transfers can strengthen impacts relative to transfers alone. So, for example, we've seen that cash transfers with good nutrition training helps households better know how to use transfer resources to improve diets and nutrition, more so than transfers alone do. We've seen that combining cash transfers with agricultural extension helps households to have the resources needed to act on the advice given through extension, improving agricultural practices. We also know that social protection can improve women's well-being specifically. Impacts do sometimes depend on design features in terms of whether household level benefits translate to benefits for women. Improvements from social protection in the evidence include on women's diets, psychological well-being, experiences of violence, measures of empowerment, including control over resources and assets, indicators of agency. In some settings, we see that targeting women or other design features strengthen the impacts for women. There's some evidence on social protection and climate shocks at the household level. A few studies show that social protection protects household well-being in times of extreme climatic events. There's actually been very little research so far looking at how social protection specifically affects women's climate resilience. Meanwhile, if social protection is designed to be gender responsive, it has significant potential to increase women's resilience to climate change. We know from the evidence that men and women are differently affected by climate change. Women often have lower resilience capacities due to, among other things, less access to financial resources, such as assets and savings, more limited livelihood opportunities, less access to information about climate change and adaptation, gender norms discouraging certain adaptation strategies, and women are also often the ones responsible for securing food for their families, which is more difficult during shocks. And these are all clearly areas where, given what we said on the last slide, social protection can support women's climate resilience capacities. There's a clear link to resources and livelihood, also increased women's empowerment, particularly if the program is designed to be gender responsive, and impacts on women's climate resilience may be stronger with complementary programs. So this could include training for women on context-specific climate adaptation strategies to address their limited access to information, or gender transformative programming to help shift norms around what practices are acceptable for women. Now, social protection stakeholders are increasingly interested in objectives around gender and climate change. And as we noted before, modifications to social protection could increase climate resilience for large numbers of resource-poor women, given the reach of these programs. However, as also noted, there's little evidence so far to guide stakeholders on what specific design features and specific complementary programs would be effective in their settings. So priorities really include generating this evidence on effective designs in diverse contexts and engaging stakeholders and building their capacity to use this evidence. So a way to start this agenda is to work with social protection stakeholders in settings where there is rapid climate change and where we have existing data and long-standing relationships, and generate evidence in these settings on these stakeholders' own programs, addressing key questions including whether social protection safeguards women's well-being during climate shocks, what specific role is played by designed features and complementary programs, how women perceive social protection's role in helping them build climate resilience, and what kind of promising new complementary programs would strengthen impacts on women's climate resilience. We can use analysis of existing data, qualitative assessments of women's perceptions, new pilot studies testing what innovative designs work, and key throughout this is engaging with stakeholders to build their understanding of the evidence and policy implications for their own programs in their own settings. Here I've included selected references for some of the evidence described throughout the presentation. Thank you very much. Please feel free to contact me with any questions or comments.